Hiya 13, so I'm going to go over the minor role poem that we've looked at in class. I'll do as I usually do. I'll skim past the bits that we've already covered that you'll have notes on already, and then I'll do the sort of analysis stanza by stanza of the poem, and hopefully that'll be really helpful then for looking back at revision. So the starter that we did for this lesson, we looked at identity as a theme that has been mentioned many times in previous lessons, and getting you to consider what identity means to you, what elements impact someone's identity, and how would you describe your own identity, something that again you wouldn't have to submit notes to on that. But as I said, last lesson we covered that, and you did do that activity. So on to the poem. I'll do what I usually do. I'll read through it, and then I have some questions, so I'll put those up once I have finished reading it. Okay, so a minor role. I'm best observed on stage, propping a spear or making endless exits and entrances with my servant's patter. Yes, sir. Oh, no, sir. If I get these midget moments wrong, the monstrous fabric shrinks to unwanted sniggers. But my heart's in the unobtrusive, the waiting room roles, driving to hospitals, parking at hospitals, holding hands under veteran magazines, making sense of consultants' monologues, asking pointed questions politely, checking dosages, dates, getting on terms with receptionists, sustaining the background music of civility. At home, in the street, you may see me walking fast in case anyone stops. Oh, getting on, getting better, my formula for well-meant intrusiveness. At home, thinking ahead. Bed, a good idea. Bed solves a lot. Answer the phone. Be wary what to say to it. Be wary what I say to it. But grateful always. Contrive meals for a hunger strike. Track down whimsical, soft-scented, happy all the way through novels. Find the cat. Mysteriously reassuring. Cancel things, tidy things, pretend all's well. Admit it's not. Learn to conjugate all genres of misery. Tears, to pour, boredom, lassitude, yearnings, for a simpler illness, like a broken leg, enduring ceremonial delays, being referred somewhere else, consultant's holiday, saying thank you for anyone, for anything to everyone, not the star part. And who would want it? I jettison the spear, the servant's tray, the terrible drone of the chorus. Yet, to my thing this act was ill-advised. It would have been better to die. No, it wouldn't. I am here to make you believe in life. Okay, so I know that we didn't go through any of the questions that I've added into this PowerPoint during our lesson, but these are some overarching questions then that you can consider to add to the notes that you've got, okay, as you're revising this poem. So thinking about the inferences that you can make from the title, in what ways does the narrator appear to suffer, why do you think the narrator behaves in the ways outlined in the poem, and what is the significance of the reference to Oedipus Rex. Okay, so hopefully you have paused that and had a little go at answering those questions to help you kind of revise the main ideas behind this poem. What we will do now is I will go through the stanzas and break down then the analysis, the interpretation I've had, and some of the points that I've come across then when researching this poem as well. So let's start then obviously with the title, minor role, so suggesting something with the theatre and this idea of a performance, which is established right from the beginning with that title. This idea then, this theme of the theatre, is continued into the first stanza. I'm best observed on stage. So this idea then, straight away initially we have this antithesis between what is real, this person, and how they really feel or how they really behave, in sort of contention with this idea of them performing and not really behaving in a sort of honest way, a true way, a truthful way, and that idea of being observed as well. It does automatically suggest that people are looking at that person and they are sort of expecting something from them in terms of a performance. So that verb observed is also quite important then as well. But we continue with this sort of almost extended metaphor then, this idea of a performance and behaving in a particular way. So propping a spear or making endless exits and entrances with a servant's patter. Now, again, this idea as well, the verbs that are used, they're sort of ongoing actions. So it suggests that there's a sort of constant performance going on for this person. They're constantly having to perform and put on a role and act. Interesting as well that the sort of fronted verb exits as well. That idea that endings are significant, and considering that there is, and you've probably seen that note there, this theme of illness and death, that idea of exits and things finishing seems quite significant as well. Exits and entrances with my servant's patter, so maybe a reluctance there for the main role as well. Doesn't really want that spotlight, so this illness is not something that they want, and they're very uncomfortable with being centre of attention. Then, interesting that the italicized phrases in this again are interjections of speech. So, yes, sir. Oh, no, sir. So there's almost a sense of passivity with this, because you've got that title, sir, and the yes and the no's, and the idea of it being a servant's role, that this person seems maybe quite passive, or feels quite passive in their illness. And again, maybe reflecting back to that idea of being in a minor role, that they're not really in the steering, the driving seat for this illness, that it's something they can't control. So therefore, maybe they have to be passive in terms of sort of fighting this illness. They don't feel that they can. If I get these midget moments wrong, so you've got here sort of commitment to the role, which I've made a note of here, which you might have seen, but there is a commitment to this role. These midget moments, because midget, that adjective there, suggesting that they're so almost nearly insignificant, but actually that they very much are very little part of a massive, broader scale. So they feel that they can't let their real feelings show in any sort of small or minor way. These midget moments wrong. So again, that idea, devil in the details, and that alliteration drawing attention to that phrase, the midget moments. It's almost a mouthful to say, really, when you're reading through that line. These midget moments wrong, the monstrous fabric. So again, we've got that antithesis as well between these minor little moments and this minor little act that she's having to constantly keep up with. And maybe not a minor act, but actually all the little ways in which she has to act are seemingly insignificant, but they're all so important in the great scheme of things. Because then she talks about this monstrous fabric, this overwhelming maybe reality would be sort of exposed if she did get these details wrong. And that idea of a monstrous fabric, for me anyway, it reminds me of the curtains on a stage, because they tend to be huge on a real sort of performance stage. Shrinks to the unwanted sniggers. So there's that alliteration there as well, the sibilance. So maybe that idea of embarrassment then is the motivation to avoid sort of people seeing through that pretense that she's putting on. You've got the coordinating conjunction here, but my heart is in the unobtrusive. Okay, so she doesn't want that sort of centre spotlight, as I said. She wants that unobserved, unobtrusive elements, the mundane. The waiting room roles. So again, we're sticking with the idea of a performance, an act, but now there is more of a lexis on hospitals here and appointments and doctors, and it's really getting into the constant referrals and waiting and sort of dealing with the illness on a more sort of the reality of it then. And there's lots of kind of caesura used in this stanza as well. You've got the sort of the colon there, you've got the semicolon there, you've got another one there, you've got another one there. So it all feels very disjointed. So although there is a sort of flow to this stanza, you've got like enjambment used here and here, and it sort of flows, but it flows in a very disjointed, awkward way. So it doesn't flow smoothly. So the repetition as well of the hospitals, so that monotony. But again, it's maybe that idea that these appointments and medication and all this waiting around and having to go and see about this illness, it interrupts the flow of her life, and it's preventing her from having a normal life. So it's stopping and starting her in that way, that she has to sort of go to hospitals and appointments, and she can't just sort of work and live normally. The waiting room roles, so again, sort of emphasis there on quite a bit of alliteration, again adding to that maybe stop, start, but a little bit of a flow as well to this stanza. Driving to hospitals, parking at hospitals. So again, there's lots of verbs that are used here, but actually some of them, I mean, waiting suggests something quite passive, and then the sort of parking is a little bit more active, but it's not strenuous motion or strenuous action. At hospitals, holding hands. So there's sort of alliteration here, okay, and it's interesting that the holding hands, the hands are described as being held under the veteran magazines. So it's almost maybe symbolising the fact that her real feelings are being subverted, and she's hiding them, because that preposition under is to suggest that something is underneath, and maybe her feelings are, not on the surface there, and she is putting on this act and therefore subverting her real feelings. Veteran magazines, so it refers to the magazines as being veteran, because if you go to any hospital or doctor's surgery, maybe not now with COVID, but you'll find that there's always those tatty magazines that are kept and hang around in the waiting rooms, but the magazines are described as veteran, which is ironic because they've obviously sustained a lot of damage, but they've survived a lot. And maybe if this person is a person with a chronic illness or an illness that is going to result in their death, then actually maybe ironically the magazines will outlast them. Making sense of consultants' monologues. So it's interesting here as well, because again, monologues links back to the idea of a play, and this idea of the consultants as well, a consultant doctor being someone who's got lots of experience, and the idea that they have the monologue suggests that they are the star at that point, that they're the one in focus. So again, sort of linking back to that idea that she is not the main, she does not have the main role. Asking pointed questions politely. So we have got this alliteration here of the P and P. Pointed might suggest that, they're very sort of focused questions. But, maybe again, hinting at this dissatisfaction that she wants to get to the root of the illness, and she wants to know what's happening with her. But yet she's asking them politely. Asking pointed questions politely, that adverb suggesting that even with this illness, she still has this sort of moral code, that she's still going to be polite about the way she's dealing with people, even if she is feeling maybe frustrated with it or dejected. Checking dosages, dates. So again, that alliteration, again suggesting a routine here as well. So checking dosages, dates. Getting on terms with receptionists. And interestingly enough, actually, the poet Fanthorpe, she herself used to work as a secretary as well, so that idea of being a receptionist is something that she would be aware of and that she's got experience of. So getting on terms with receptionists. Sustaining the background music of civility. So again, that link to a kind of waiting room where you have that kind of music in the background. And sustaining herself, is that maybe her aim, that she wants to sustain herself to survive? And then interesting with the sort of end focus on civility, sort of why focus on that? Are morals important to her, and she doesn't want to lose who she is despite her illness? Okay, so on to the next one then. So there's a shift now as she kind of, again, sort of changes the focus here in this next stanza. At home, in the street, you may see me. So there's a direct address there as well, and this sort of modal verb might suggest there as well that there's an uncertainty, that she's maybe at hospital more than she's at home, or that she goes out of the house. She doesn't maybe go out often because of her illness. Walking fast, so again this sort of verb and the adverb there being used maybe might suggest that she does want to avoid people. She makes it as quick as she can when she is leaving the house, that she doesn't want to be out, she doesn't want to be stopped. And again, this idea then of her stopping kind of contrasts with this idea of walking fast as well. So again, suggesting that sort of reluctance, that she doesn't want to stop and speak to people. And again, we've got this interjection then of dialogue, so getting on, getting better, and you've got these verbs, this idea of getting, but sort of the volume of hospital appointments that she mentions in the previous stanza suggests that that's not necessarily true, and the fact that she calls it a formula suggests that it's a script, it's something that she's put together, that she's sticking to it, and maybe that is her coping mechanism. And the fact that she calls it a formula, it's metaphorical, it's not a formula that she has. For well-meant intrusiveness, so again that idea of being under scrutiny and that performance, that it's that pretense, that she doesn't want people to actually see and know the reality. Thinking ahead, so again that the idea of thinking ahead to things, that's her focus, that she thinks about things an awful lot. Bed, a good idea, so again we've got that kind of interjection of dialogue, and then again this is her speaking now herself. Bed solves a lot, so it's interesting again that brackets have been used to almost separate this clause out, and that emphasis with caesura there as well, with the semicolon. Bed solves a lot, so maybe there's a hint there towards her illness. Is it a mental health illness? Is there maybe hints of depression there? Because she doesn't want to see people, she doesn't want to interact with people, she wants to isolate herself, and that idea of feeling a kind of exhaustion and despondency and not wanting to engage with things. However, the semicolon there sort of divides this idea between her being quite lethargic maybe, but then actually she does make communication with people and build that communication as she does answer the phone. That verb suggests that, answer the phone. Be wary what I say. So again, it links into this performance, and that is a consistent theme here, that she's putting on an act and she's putting on a show. This coordinating conjunction, sort of, there's a lack there. There's that sort of difference between maybe she doesn't like this idea that people are checking in on her, but she is actually grateful for it as well. Maybe she's fulfilling her role as well of trying to be grateful. Maybe it's not that she is grateful, but when she's answering the phone, she's pretending to be grateful. It's going to be interpreted in different ways there. And something I forgot to mention there when it talks about it, that I say to it, so it's almost like objectifying, and well, not objectifying, personifying the phone maybe, and sort of, I suppose, objectifying the person on the phone, so it associates them with the phone rather than her actually speaking to that person. There's impersonal there, so that again, that idea of lack of communication, that's in unwillingness to engage with others. Contrive meals for a hunger strike, track down whimsical, soft-scented, happy all the way through novels. So again, it's quite interesting that she uses that verb contrive meals. There's instead of making meals, contrive, and again, it's almost when you contrive something, you're constructing something as again a fallacy. It's not true. So she's contriving meals for a hunger strike. So that idea that she's not really eating what she's making. Whimsical, soft-scented, happy all the way through novels. So there's almost a sarcastic tone with the way that these are listed here. And all of these kind of adjectives, soft, happy, maybe then are thrown into contrast against how she's truly feeling. Find the cat. So maybe this is giving her some purpose, this verb here, find, and that idea that she's got a cat, she's got something to look after. Mysteriously reassuring. So this idea then that there is something comforting about the idea of having maybe another creature close by, of having another animal in the house, of having a animal in the house. Cancel things, tidy things, pretend all's well. So again, this idea of pretense that's engaged with sort of Western society maybe as well, that we're sort of less willing and likely to admit when we're sort of struggling with something, and this is maybe why we get the idea of it being a mental health issue rather than anything else. The fact that she's cancelling things as well, there's almost a distraction there as well. She doesn't want to engage with people, and the tidying things, again, that could be that distraction that she doesn't want to be sort of thinking. Admit that it's not. So this one line at the end here is very short and purposefully sort of placed at the end. So maybe that is the truth, that the illness is actually silencing the speaker, because it talks about her sort of wanting to admit that there's something wrong there, and she knows that it's wrong. Learn to conjugate all the genres of misery. So we've got as well, when it goes on to the next line, tears to pour, boredom, lassitude, all of these sort of emotive lexical set, really. It's talking about this idea of being sort of quite lethargic, not really engaging with things, maybe being quite upset, a yearning for things, again, misery, melancholy. But these two in particular, that end line focus, so these may be more significant emotions that are being felt by the narrator. And then it goes on for a simpler illness, like a broken leg. So that caesura as well acts very well in terms of emphasising this simile, like a broken leg. And it must be serious if the speaker is making light almost of a broken leg. Like that would be something that would be easier, because that's still a very painful injury. So it suggests that the illness that she's battling, that the how she's suffering, would be it would be easier to experience a physical illness, something that can be far more tangible and far more obvious maybe to outside people to deal with, and actually something that maybe she feels would be easier to cope with. Going on to the last sections then. So enduring, so that idea as well of still suffering, because it's that idea of going through something that you have to undertake. Enduring ceremonial delays. So this idea as well that often with the medical field there can be delays, and you don't get results back straight away, or you have to wait to speak to a doctor, or you have to wait for an appointment. She sees them as ceremonial, that they're something that should be avoided, that there's no reason to have that kind of delay. Being referred somewhere else. So maybe there is a sense of getting frustrated here as well, where she's almost having to wait longer than's necessary. Consultant's holiday. So again, that idea of maybe being let down when actually she just wants to get to the bottom of things. Saying thank you. Okay, so again, N stopped on that idea of being courteous, the dialogue, and something that she feels she has to be grateful for this. So maybe again reinforcing the idea that her illness constrains her and constricts her. And again, this pretense, because maybe how she really feels is frustrated, as we can see from the lines before. And again, the caesura kind of pausing and slowing down and interrupting the flow of that stanza, just like these sort of delays are pausing and interrupting the flow of her life. Not the star part, so maybe again she doesn't feel like she's in control, and then that is maybe why she is the one that is the minor role, and not in the sort of driving seat of this. Not the star part, and maybe again wants to avoid death. And who would want it? So that rhetorical question as well, so suggesting that the illness is severe and it's something that no one would really want. But there's a rejection here. I jettison the spear. She's rejecting it. She's throwing it away. That verb jettison, suggesting that, you know, she is fighting, and there is fight in her, despite the fact that she's in bed, and she's going into bed, and that she's reluctant to answer the phone, and that she wants to avoid people in the street. There is fight in her. The servant's tray. So again, acting maybe not just for herself but for others too. The significance there of the servant, because obviously they serve others, but obviously she's rejecting that role now. The terrible drone of chorus. So this is where we get this idea of a Greek tragedy, which so often results in the hero, the main protagonist in the story, facing their demise, usually through death. Yet to my thinking this act was ill-advised. It would have been better to die. So we have this interjection, this chorus from Oedipus Rex, and they are reflecting on when Oedipus has gouged out his own eyes because he realises that a man that he killed when he was younger was actually his father, and he's ended up marrying his mother, who has taken her own life because of the realisation that the man that she was married to, her second husband, was actually her son. And in this sort of original Greek play, the chorus reflect on the fact that it would have been better for Oedipus to die rather than continue to suffer, which is the note I've got there for you. But we have this very simple sentence in this line, an exclamatory as well. No, it wouldn't. So it's that rejection, absolute rejection as well, because it's so resolute in that sort of simple, emotive and exclamatory sentence within that line. And then it's a very interesting focus on the end of the poem. That single stanza line, single line stanza. I am here to make you believe in life. So interesting, the personal pronouns there, it makes it very personal and obviously directed then towards the reader. But there's almost a sense of carpe diem, so that idea of seizing the day, and actually, you know, being grateful for the life that we have, and for the opportunities that we have, and, you know, if we are unencumbered by illness, to take advantage of that and to celebrate life. And that is focused on at the end of the poem, suggesting that the poet then leaves on an optimistic tone and leaves with an optimistic message at the end. So I'll just go over some of the notes that I've got there at the end. So there is tension throughout between illusion and reality, so pretending all is well when actually it's not. We have that sort of extended metaphor throughout where she's continuing to talk about acting. And again, it's interesting that this writer, I know I'm about to mention power as one of the key themes, but the writer, Fanthorpe, actually used to be a teacher and used to be a head of department, and chose to leave that career because she found that power changed her as a person. She didn't really like the person that she was becoming, and she did end up working in medical offices, and she did actually work as a receptionist. And it's interesting that she's written this poem reflecting on sort of maybe comings and goings of ill patients, and she obviously had some experience of that, of seeing people waiting in doctors' offices as well. So there could be sort of a bit of a theme with her looking in as an outsider there as well, at sort of how other people might cope with an illness and reflect on an illness. Alright, so key themes then for this particular poem. So identity is a main one there, and obviously the second one is going to tie in closely with that, because the identity of this person, it's almost as though the illness controls that and sort of impedes their life. But identity is such a sort of key trope in many of the poems that we've already studied. We've had a little look at those. We discussed identity a lot in class as well. So obviously reflect back on those notes as well when we're going through these. Illness as well, often explored in literature as illness, chronic, physical or mental, can have such a lasting impact. And particularly in this one as well, it's so ambiguous that you're not quite certain whether it is a chronic illness, a physical illness, or a mental illness that this person is dealing with. It's clearly something that's not obvious, because they have that yearning for their illness to be something as simple as a broken leg. So it suggests that it is something that's hidden, that can't be obviously seen. So that's interesting there as well, that they've sort of decided to explore that and make it ambiguous, maybe to make it more relatable for those who do suffer with an illness of either chronic, physical or mental nature. Power then, so this can often relate to control and is often explored in connection with how much a person has power. So that as well, it's interesting because this person, it doesn't seem like they have a lot of power. It seems like the illness has taken that away from them, and it's interesting to kind of speculate on whether that is something that they have control over, in terms of how they're reacting to the illness, because they talk about sort of rushing home, not really wanting to speak to someone, and whether that is a physical thing that then they want to avoid discussing. But obviously if it is more of a kind of mental side of things and mental health side of things, then that isn't going to be something that they're going to have as much control over. So again, it makes it very ambiguous and very open to interpretation. But I hope that helps, and I've gone through that in enough detail for you. But as ever, if there are any questions, please feel free to email me or drop me a little message on our Google Classroom.